Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Amanda Horvat, and I am so excited to be back. We have some new ideas coming out soon, but we really wanted to kind of jump right back into everything with with March happening and it being Women's History Month. We wanted to really be able to take some time to talk a little bit more about the history of sororities and how we came to be and what happened kind of along the way for a lot of our women that started our organizations originally. So you're either listening to this on our podcast or watching this on YouTube. Either way is totally fine. I'm here in my backyard. You probably see the dogs roaming around a little bit. Burrow and Nola always like to give a little segment of FaceTime with our audience, so they're lucky to be here too. So I really just want to jump in more so than anything. We know, and most people do know, that fraternities came first in our whole Greek life, fraternity and sorority systems overall. So we know that originally they were secret societies, secret literary societies that started on college and university campuses. And as they were doing those or meeting as secret societies, although nobody knew about them, they became more social over time, I would say. And more of our colleges and universities started to really recognize them as student organizations on their campuses and the need for social experiences. Kind of along the same lines, sororities, many of our women's organizations started very similarly. So there weren't a whole lot of women on or able to attend colleges and universities of the time. And what we know now is, realistically looking back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, women were not seen as really true people. They were seen as less than, pretty much in every way that you could potentially think about it. They weren't going to schools, they were getting married more, and that was their job: get married, start a household, have children, and go from there and begin a life with their husbands. So when it came to more and more women attending our colleges and universities, they didn't really feel like they had any kind of connectedness to their campus, to other women on their campus, whatever that may have looked like. They didn't have that, or didn't feel like they were truly belonging in that college environment. And they, at that point, had known that there were several men's groups that were forming, whether they were literary societies or secret societies at the time. But they decided to come together, and women just really wanted to be able to spend time with other women. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, I feel like a lot of that still goes on today. So keeping in that vein, really, women, because they weren't seen, or they were seen less than, we have a lot of women come forward saying that they want to be able to spend more time with one another, and they wanted to feel that sense of belonging and a sense of community overall. And they did a good job and kind of formed their own secret societies, where at first it may have been literary, but because they didn't have much of a social outlet — this is Burrow, by the way, if you're watching — they didn't have that social outlet, then they were able to kind of create it within themselves. So really, once they became affiliated with colleges and universities, men's groups started to take notice, and more and more socials began to happen, ways to meet different people on campuses through the activities of those particular organizations. But realistically, those women's fraternities were born at that point in time, and more of them began to form and be founded on a bunch of different ideals and just belief systems. And you'll see that today continuing with our organizations. All of our organizations have a different set of values. They recruit differently. They talk to women about what their historical references are and what that means as a women's organization. So I will say, as a point of information as well, the term sorority actually was not coined until 1882 by Gamma Phi Beta, and they coined that term using the word soror from Latin, and soror means sister, and they decided to coin the term sorority. So they are actually known as the first sorority that was founded in 1882. Ones before that were seen as women's fraternities, more and more as time went on. And again, being founded on different ideals and different values, different organizations were created. And we now know that we have 26 NPC organizations, but even at the time, probably in the early 1900s, more so than any other time, we still know that women were not created equal, just as a gender themselves. And there were still women on our campuses that were not accepted into other organizations because of what they believed in or what their religious views were. And there were several organizations founded that let those women in because of their religious views and religious beliefs. I know I've talked about this before. As a woman who is a member of an organization that was founded because back in 1912, women were not accepted for their religious beliefs. I think we've come a really long way. And although we are now open to women of all faiths, I think a lot happened in our history to kind of get us to a point where we are very inclusive, even in the campuses that we're on. So knowing that, the other thing that continued to happen on our campuses were recruitment efforts. And I'm sure you're familiar with the term rush. And although it is a term that we don't use often or at all, really, in formal language for NPC or our national organizations in general, rush was actually coined that way. That recruitment term was utilized because when women would get notification or find out about new students coming to campuses to begin their semester, begin working or doing whatever they wanted to do within their academic programs, those women from those organizations would rush to the train station, as people most of the time traveled that way. So they would rush to the train station to try to recruit more women to join their organizations. And actually, recruitment in general led to the first discussion between several national women's fraternities at that time. And what was happening was they were finding more and more that members of the organizations were being what they termed as lifted, quote unquote, from one organization to another. And NPC was kind of formed. Alpha Phi came to the table and invited the other groups to come together and formed what was originally known as the Intersorority Conference in 1902. Was the first time that a group of women were able to sit down together and really have some discussions about what the recruitment process should look like and what it could be. So we know that out of that, clearly more organizations, sororities joined the NPC over time. And now, as it is today, we have 26 NPC groups. And NPC serves as the umbrella organization. But NPC is a powerful group of women overall, and they are known as really the largest women's trade organization in the world because of all the members from each particular organization. So you'll see that, and you'll probably hear that over time as well. I will say that we still have, I think, a lot of work to do when it comes to equity and inclusion. When you're looking at women and women of different backgrounds and cultures, experiences, all of that comes together. And we, sorry, I'm looking at my dogs, but we do have a lot of work to do, and we need to make sure that we are creating spaces where different groups of women, wherever they come from, whatever their background may be, are feeling comfortable with our organizations. And I say that specifically to kind of lead into a little bit of history on our NPHC sororities that were founded also in the early 1900s, because there were women, African American women and cultural women, that were not wanted or not accepted into the original, I guess you can say, some of the original organizations that were on campuses. So I think some of that is still around today. And groups are known as the Divine Nine, and there's that set of organizations that really work together. And then we have NPC, but then there's also NPHC. But more and more, we're seeing that we have our Latinx folks definitely joining into different organizations, and they have NALFO as their umbrella organization. And we have Asian American Pacific Islanders have their set of organizations also. But I think where in some ways, I do believe there's health in those communities and well-being for those members that join different organizations based, joining different culturally based organizations. I think that in and of itself is really powerful, but I do believe that overall, our membership in total, we do have some responsibility to make sure that people from everywhere are feeling welcome into any organization, necessarily not just our NPC groups. But I think the education really needs to be there too. And I think there's so many things that our college students today don't know about their own organizations. And if you're talking about a panel and a council on a campus, may not know how many of the NPHC groups were originally founded, or how our multicultural groups were created and founded by people because they weren't accepted in other places. And where that definitely took a lot of time, work, and effort by those young men and women back then, I think some of that is still inherent in a lot of our organizations. And I don't necessarily think that that has to go away, but I do think that we have the responsibility in making sure that our membership is educated overall about the different groups and why and how all of the groups may be seen as different, and different is okay. And I think we need to just continue to celebrate those differences and recognize that, and continue to educate people over time so they have a better understanding of how everything, all of our organizations came to be originally. I know there has been, and I've tried to be a part of lots of different educational programs that have gone on throughout this month, whether it's been through NPC or AFA, or I'm actually attending an event on Monday at the World War II Museum about the power of women and what happened in World War II and how they had so much responsibility and had to take over a lot of the tasks that the men who were at war were originally a part of. So I'm excited for that event, but I do continue to be educated and making sure that I'm able to share some of that knowledge with the men and women that I am very lucky to come into contact with, whether it's personally or professionally. I do try to take advantage of that as much as possible. But again, this is kind of just a short, brief podcast or YouTube video if you're watching, like I said, to just give some background information as to how we came to be overall because of the way that the world was, and civil rights movement was also involved in that, and organizations changed their membership policies throughout those years too. So just keeping everything in the back of our mind. And as we're celebrating women throughout the month of March, I think it's really important to keep all of that kind of in the front of our minds as we celebrate the women and the pioneers that have come before us, and looking to potentially do some of those things in the future for those who come after us. So thank you so much. I am happy to get this information out. Feel free, if you do have any questions or thoughts about anything, feel free to shoot us an email and our contact information, or message us through Instagram or however you listen to this podcast. So thanks, y'all. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I am looking forward to chatting with you again soon.